Thanks for joining us here for this interview spotlight at the Global SCM Conference here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Greg Thompson and joined by Paige Siplon from the state of Georgia. And Paige, what are you doing with the state of Georgia? Because it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, first of all. So I run what's called the Center of Innovation for Logistics. It's an industry-focused component of the Department of Economic Development. So we work with companies of all kinds really any company that is focused on moving products to customers or moving their products from point A to point B, we help them sort of figure that out. Whether they're already here in Georgia and using logistics and supply chains as a competitive part of their business. We help them figure out how to grow and compete for new business. And then we also work as a recruiting arm with the department and the state to help companies figure out why they need to expand their business here in Georgia or set up a new distribution center or maybe even relocate their headquarters here to our state. We've got a lot of great assets, and logistics and transportation is one of those. A lot of things go into a decision-making process and a business development process when they're trying to figure out where to be. And we know transportation and logistics is part of that. That's where we come in.
Your presentation today, you talked a lot about infrastructure,
Sure.
and that was something that Keith Biondo and I discussed in our session. And that was a topic, along with big data, that was kind of pervasive here at the conference. And we in the United States are living in a time of crumbling infrastructure.
Sure.
As you know, the interstate highway system was built in the 1950s. It was planned for 75 years. We are in the last third, and really the very last third of that life cycle now. Talk to me a little bit about what's happening there.
Well, first of all, this is not just an individual state issue. This is something that we need to address as a nation, right? We are doing things here in Georgia to try to focus on logistics and supply chain and the infrastructure that needs to help move that products to its customers, as I said before. And that's the role that the state plays in this infrastructure issue. What can we do as a state to be a better partner to private industry? One of those things is providing the infrastructure they need to be able to move their goods to people that need to consume them. And it supports a wide range of employees and jobs and is a critical component of our economy. That story is the same for really every other state in our union, regardless of their locations. The infrastructure might be a little different. Some places use more rail than roads. Some places use more ports than air. But it factors into this logistics ecosystem that is so critically important to our economy in so many different ways.
I like the fact that you refer to it as an ecosystem. We've kind of been in a slow recovery, and you look at that. Texas A&M has done those studies, and gridlock and all that. There's just so many things happening in this area. If it's ignored, I mean, can you talk about that a little bit from an economic standpoint?
Yeah, well, first of all, you said it's a system. I use the word ecosystem quite often, as you mentioned, and I think that's probably the most important word that we need to keep saying, that it is connected, that the roads and the impact and the amount of freight that it moves. But if you took the roads, if you could play sort of logistics czar and could remove trucks, the airports shut down. If you remove trains, the seaports shut down. They're all connected, and if you remove any of that, the Home Depots and the Walmarts of the world are impacted. So it is an ecosystem. They're all critically dependent on one another, and we need to fund it and think about it in that capacity. We need funding to deepen our harbor in the Port of Savannah. That is critically connected to our roads and our rail infrastructure as well. That's how it all moves. It's all connected. And we are having an infrastructure conversation, better late than never. We've got a couple great federal policy groups that have come together. I mentioned in my presentation the U.S. Department of Commerce and their Supply Chain Advisory Committee.
I found that really fascinating because they have not, and you think about it, they probably should have been in on the conversation a long time ago, and somebody finally said, hey, why don't you join the party? And tell me a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So the Secretary of Commerce has brought together 40 private industry folks that have different perspectives on what supply chains do and how they are impacted by things that the federal government does, and both in a positive and a negative way. And they're soliciting input from us, this group of 40, on a variety of topics that can make a difference to the competitiveness of supply chains. We can't give recommendations like improve trade with Mexico. While that may be something we need to do, that's not something that the federal government can make some actionable short-term wins on. And so we're looking at things, how does permitting, how does policy, what's the right role for government when it comes to supply chain competitiveness? And those are the things that I think, I applaud them for bringing in private industry into that conversation. And Department of Transportation, same way.
The argument sounds like it's being made is, look, if we can make that investment, we can move things quicker, faster, better, more efficiently, more cost effectively, and we can grow our economy, which is something that we need to do.
Sure. Well, I'll just use the Port of Savannah as an example because I'm very familiar with it, obviously. If you look at the harbor deepening projects, when we talk about infrastructure investment and the return it has on the economy, $174 million a year return, not to Savannah, not to Georgia, although we're part of that because we're part of the United States. And that $174 million impact that just deepening the Savannah Harbor has on the nation as a whole ripples out across all sorts of companies, across economies that are very far away from the Port of Savannah geographically. $5.50 to every dollar that we invest in just that one project. And there are lots of projects around the United States when it comes to transportation and logistics that have those kinds of returns that haven't been studied the 15 years that we've been studying the Port of Savannah project. But those kind of projects are out there. Those are the places with the shrinking budgets and the limited amount of money that we have, we should be extra careful, and we are, as a nation, being extra careful on where we place those bets. And we should be placing them where we've got a high probability of return. And $5.50 to every dollar we put in is a pretty darn good investment. And those are the investments we need to be making. Those are the investments that we are making, and we need to keep pushing on that.
Well, that's exciting stuff, and I think the future looks bright if we are able, like you said, to target things and make those proper investments and watch the infrastructure grow. I thank you for the time you spent with us, and thanks for joining us on this Interview Spotlight.